Please, just listen to me.
I'm listening.
It wasn't what you think, I promise.
I love this. It's perfect.
Me too, let's go inside.
After you, my love.
Our home.
The night Kofi pushed his own mother out of his house, the neighbors said they heard her crying all the way down the dusty road. Some whispered that he had become heartless after his success. Others said wealth had poisoned his soul. But what no one knew, what no one even imagined, was the heavy secret sitting in Kofi's chest as he watched his mother walk away with trembling steps, holding only a small worn-out bag. Sometimes the actions that look the cruelest carry the deepest pain behind them. In the quiet village of Aboso, everyone knew Kofi as the boy who rose from nothing. He was the pride of his late father's family and the shining example for every struggling child in the community. Years ago he had walked barefoot to school, carrying books tied together with a rubber band. His mother, Mama Ajoa, sold roasted corn by the roadside, standing under the scorching sun just to pay his school fees. She often went to bed hungry, pretending she had already eaten, just so her son would have enough food to grow strong. Their bond was something people admired, something they believed could never be broken. When Kofi finally made it in the city, his success felt like a victory for the entire village. He built a beautiful house with tall gates, shiny tiles and glass windows that reflected the bright Ghanaian sun. He brought his mother to live with him, promising she would never struggle again. For a while, their home was filled with laughter, shared meals, and stories from the old days that made them both smile. Mama Ajoa would sit outside in the evenings, thanking God for how far her son had come. But slowly things began to change. Kofi became quieter. He spent long nights locked inside his room, staring at old photographs and unread messages on his phone. Mama Ajoa noticed the distance growing between them, but she said nothing. Like many African mothers, she believed patience and prayer could heal any wound. She continued waking up early to cook his favorite meals and kept the house warm with her gentle presence. Then came the evening that shattered everything. The argument started small, like a spark in dry grass. Neighbors later said they heard raised voices, furniture moving, and the sound of something breaking. No one dared to interfere. When the front door finally opened, Mama Ajoa stumbled out, tears streaming down her face. Kofi stood behind her, his face stiff, his hands shaking as he placed her small bag on the ground beside her. Without another word, he pushed the gate open and told her she could no longer stay in his house. The village was shocked when the news spread. How could the boy she sacrificed everything for turn against her like that? Some called him ungrateful. Others said he had lost his humanity. Mama Ajoa, however, never spoke badly about her son. She simply wiped her tears and began walking toward a place no one expected her to go. What the village did not know was that hidden inside Kofi's house was a truth that had been buried for decades, a truth that would soon change how everyone saw that heartbreaking night. Kofi stood behind the closed gate long after his mother disappeared down the narrow road. His hands rested on the cold metal, and his breathing grew heavier with every step she took away from him. Inside the house, the silence felt louder than any argument. The walls that once held laughter now felt like they were closing in on him. He walked back into the living room where a framed family photo lay shattered on the floor. He stared at it for a long time before slowly picking it up, careful not to cut his fingers on the broken glass. The photo was taken years ago, back in Aboso village. Kofi was younger, smiling widely, standing beside Mama Ajoa and his late father. He wiped the dust from the picture, but his eyes were fixed on one corner of the frame where a small part of the image had faded. It was something he had noticed many times before but never fully understood as a child. Now, that faded corner felt like it was holding answers he had been afraid to face. Earlier that week, Kofi had received a call that stirred memories he had buried for years. The voice on the phone belonged to an elderly man from the village, someone who had known his family closely. The man spoke slowly as if choosing his words carefully. He told Kofi that there were things about his past that he deserved to know, things that his father had taken to the grave. At first, Kofi ignored the call, thinking it was just another village rumor. But the old man called again and again, until curiosity and fear began to grow inside him. Eventually, Kofi agreed to listen. What he heard during that conversation left him restless for days. He started searching through old boxes in his house, boxes his mother had brought from the village when she moved in with him. Inside them were worn-out clothes, school certificates, old letters, and family keepsakes. Each item carried a memory of sacrifice and love, but also raised questions that refused to settle in his mind. One evening, while Mama Ajoa was preparing dinner, Kofi found a small envelope hidden inside one of the boxes. It was sealed and had no name written on it. The paper looked older than most of the things in the box. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. Inside was a letter written in handwriting he did not recognize. The words were faded, but they were clear enough to read. As he went through the lines, his heart pounded harder. The letter mentioned promises, regrets, and a secret that was never supposed to surface. Before he could finish reading, he heard his mother's footsteps approaching the room. Without thinking, he quickly folded the letter and hid it inside his pocket. That night at dinner, Kofi could barely eat. Mama Ajoa noticed his unusual silence and asked if something was wrong. He forced a small smile and said he was just tired from work. She nodded, but her eyes searched his face like she could sense the storm building inside him. The tension between them slowly grew over the next few days. Kofi became distant, lost in his thoughts, while Mama Ajoa tried to hold on to their usual routine. The argument that exploded that evening didn't begin with shouting. It began with a simple question. Kofi asked his mother about the letter. At first she froze. The cooking spoon slipped slightly from her hand before she placed it down carefully. She asked him where he found it, her voice calm but trembling underneath. Kofi repeated his question, this time more firmly. The air in the room felt heavy, like the walls were listening. Mama Ajoa sat down slowly and stared at the floor for a long moment. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with fear, guilt, and something deeper that Kofi could not understand. She told him some stories were never meant to be opened, and some truths only bring pain. But Kofi had already crossed the line of curiosity. He demanded answers, his voice rising as years of hidden doubt began to spill out. What Mama Ajoa said next was so unexpected that it shook the very foundation of everything Kofi believed about his life, and it pushed them toward the heartbreaking moment that the entire village would soon witness. Mama Ajoa's lips trembled as she struggled to speak, and for a moment, it looked like she might change her mind and walk away from the conversation. But Kofi stood firmly in front of her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger, fear, and desperation. She finally whispered that the letter was connected to a time in their lives she had prayed would remain buried forever. Her voice was soft, almost breaking, as she told him that some sacrifices mothers make are too painful to explain, especially when they are made to protect their children. Kofi felt frustration rising inside him. He asked her who wrote the letter and why it spoke about promises and secrets. Mama Ajoa hesitated again, pressing her hands together tightly. She said the letter came from someone who once played an important role in their family's survival, someone who stepped in during a time when everything was falling apart after his father became seriously ill. She tried to stop there, but Kofi pushed harder, demanding to know what she meant. The room felt suffocating, filled with words that refused to fully come out. As their voices grew louder, memories from the past began to flood Mama Ajoa's mind. She remembered the long nights she spent sitting beside her husband's sickbed, unsure if he would survive until morning. She remembered the growing debts, the empty food containers, and the shame of asking neighbors for help. During those difficult times, a stranger had entered their lives, offering assistance when no one else could. Mama Ajoa explained that sometimes help comes with complicated consequences, but she stopped short of revealing what those consequences were. Kofi could sense there was more she was hiding. His thoughts raced back to the phone call from the elderly man in the village. The man had warned him that family stories are not always what they seem and that truth often arrives when people are least prepared. The words from that call echoed in Kofi's head as he watched his mother avoid his eyes. He began wondering if the life he believed was built on his parents' sacrifices alone had other hidden pieces he had never been told about. Outside their home, whispers were already beginning to spread. A distant cousin who worked in the city had heard rumors about an old debt connected to Kofi's family. Meanwhile, back in Aboso village, the elderly man who first called Kofi was quietly speaking to a few trusted elders, saying that the past had a way of catching up with people no matter how far they ran. The village elders exchanged worried glances, knowing parts of the story that had never been spoken openly. Back inside the house, Mama Ajoa stood up and walked toward the small wooden cabinet where she kept family items and prayer books. She reached for something inside but paused, as if her hands had suddenly become too heavy to move. Kofi noticed her hesitation and demanded she show him whatever she was hiding. His voice cracked slightly, revealing that beneath his anger was fear of losing the image of the family he had always believed in. Mama Ajoa turned to face him, tears slowly sliding down her cheeks. She told him that revealing the full truth could destroy the peace he had worked so hard to build. She begged him to trust her silence, saying that love sometimes means protecting someone from painful realities. But Kofi, already shaken by the letter and the mysterious phone calls, refused to accept half answers. The tension between them stretched like a rope ready to snap. Each question Kofi asked seemed to push Mama Ajoa deeper into a corner she had avoided for years. And as she finally reached into the cabinet and pulled out another old item wrapped carefully in cloth, both of them knew that whatever was hidden inside could change their lives forever. Yet neither of them was ready for what it might reveal. Mama Ajoa slowly unwrapped the cloth, her fingers shaking as if each fold carried a memory she wished she could forget. Inside was a small, worn bracelet made of simple brown beads. It didn't look valuable, but the way she held it made it feel heavy with meaning. Kofi stared at it, confused and frustrated. He asked why something so ordinary was causing so much fear. Mama Ajoa swallowed hard and explained that the bracelet once belonged to a man who helped them during the darkest period of their lives. She refused to say more, but her silence only made Kofi's mind race with more questions. Kofi grabbed the bracelet gently but firmly, turning it in his hand as he searched for any clue. He noticed a small symbol carved into one of the beads. It looked familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. The memory stayed just out of reach, making him even more restless. He asked his mother again who the man was and why she had kept something that clearly reminded her of painful memories. Mama Ajoa's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered that sometimes reminders are kept not out of love, but out of obligation. At the same time, far back in Aboso village, the elderly man who had called Kofi sat outside his compound, watching the sun set slowly behind the palm trees. A younger villager approached him, curious about the quiet conversations he had been having with the elders. The old man sighed and said that some family stories are like deep wells. You only see the surface water, but no one knows how deep or dangerous it is underneath. He mentioned that Kofi's late father had once carried a burden that could have broken the entire family if it had been exposed. The younger man asked if the truth would ever come out, but the elder simply shook his head, saying that truth often arrives through pain. Back in the city, Kofi's cousin Amma had started hearing whispers through family phone calls and social media messages. She remembered visiting Kofi and his parents years ago when she was still a child. She recalled one particular visit when a stranger had come to the house and spoke privately with Mama Ajoa. Amma never understood why her aunt looked so frightened after that meeting. The memory suddenly felt important and she considered calling Kofi, but she hesitated, unsure if she would be helping or making things worse. Inside Kofi's house, the tension continued to grow. Mama Ajoa sat quietly, her shoulders heavy as if she had been carrying invisible weight for years. Kofi paced the room, replaying every childhood memory in his mind, searching for signs he might have missed. He began questioning moments that once felt normal, like why his father had always avoided certain visitors or why his mother sometimes cried late at night when she thought he was asleep. Kofi finally stopped pacing and looked directly at his mother, asking if the man connected to the bracelet was still alive. The question made Mama Ajoa freeze. Her silence was louder than any answer. She slowly stood up and walked toward the window, staring out at the quiet street as if expecting someone to appear from the darkness. She admitted that some people from the past never truly leave, even when you pray for distance. Just as Kofi prepared to press further, his phone began ringing loudly on the table. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something about it made his chest tighten. Mama Ajoa turned quickly, her face filled with fear as she stared at the phone. Kofi hesitated before reaching for it, sensing that whoever was calling might hold another piece of the mystery that was slowly pulling their family apart. Kofi stared at the phone as it continued ringing, each vibration making the air in the room feel tighter. Mama Ajoa slowly shook her head, her eyes silently begging him not to answer. That reaction alone sent a cold feeling through his chest. The call ended before he could decide, but almost immediately, a message notification appeared on the screen. His hands felt unusually heavy as he picked up the phone and opened it. The message was short, but it carried a weight that made his stomach twist. It simply read, "You deserve to know the truth about your family. Meet me before it's too late." Kofi's heart began pounding. He looked at his mother, hoping she would explain, but she turned away, gripping the edge of the window frame as if she needed it to stay standing. He asked her if she knew who sent the message. Mama Ajoa whispered that some doors once opened, can never be closed again. Her voice cracked as she begged him to delete the message and forget everything. But the more she pleaded, the more determined Kofi became. Years of hidden confusion and the recent discoveries had already pushed him beyond the point of ignoring the past. Later that night, Kofi sat alone in his room, staring at the bracelet and the old letter spread across his table. He replayed the message over and over in his mind. A part of him feared what he might learn, but another part felt like his entire life had been built on unanswered questions. As he studied the bracelet again, the carved symbol suddenly triggered a distant memory. He remembered seeing the same symbol years ago, painted faintly on an old building near the edge of a Boso village, a place children were warned never to play around. The memory made his skin crawl with unease. Meanwhile, Mama Ajoa sat in the living room, clutching her prayer beads tightly as she whispered silent prayers. Her mind drifted back to the past she had fought so hard to bury. She remembered the stranger who had entered their lives during her husband's illness. He had come offering help when no one else would. At the time, she believed it was a blessing sent to save her family. But that help came with conditions she never fully understood until it was too late. The thought of those conditions resurfacing now made her chest tighten with fear. Back in a Boso village, the elderly man who had first contacted Kofi received a visit from an unknown traveler. The man asked questions about Kofi's family history, his late father, and Mama Ajoa's years in the village. The elder noticed the same carved symbol hanging from the traveler's necklace. His face darkened with worry, realizing that forces connected to the past were moving again. After the traveler left, the old man immediately tried calling Kofi, but the call failed to connect, leaving him restless and anxious. The next morning, Kofi made a decision that would push everything further toward the unknown. He replied to the mysterious message, agreeing to meet. He didn't tell his mother. Something deep inside him feared she would stop him, or worse, reveal something that might shatter him before he was ready to hear it from anyone else. He left the house quietly, carrying the bracelet in his pocket as if it were a key to a locked part of his life. As Kofi approached the meeting location, he noticed someone standing in the distance, partially hidden by shadows. The figure stepped forward slowly, and Kofi felt his breath catch when he saw what the person was holding. It was a faded photograph, one that appeared to include his father, Mama Ajoa, and a third person whose face had been carefully scratched out, as if someone had tried to erase them from history. Kofi's heart pounded as he stepped closer to the stranger holding the scratched photograph. The man looked older, with tired eyes that carried years of untold stories. Without saying a word, he handed the photograph to Kofi. Up close, Kofi could clearly see his father and mother standing side by side, but the third figure had been deliberately scratched out, as if someone wanted their existence forgotten. Kofi demanded to know who the person was and why he had been called there. The man took a deep breath and said the truth had been hidden to protect him, but it had also been slowly destroying his family. The stranger revealed that many years ago, when Kofi's father fell seriously ill, their family had reached a point where survival felt impossible. Debts had piled up and food had become scarce. The man explained that he was the one who stepped in to help them financially, making sure Kofi's father received treatment and ensuring Kofi could continue going to school. At first, it sounded like an act of kindness, but his voice grew heavy as he explained that the help came with a painful agreement. He said Mama Ajoa had been forced to accept a promise that one day, when Kofi became successful, he would help repay a debt that was never about money alone. Kofi felt his chest tighten as the man continued. He revealed that Kofi's father had known about the agreement before he passed away. According to him, Kofi's father had begged Mama Ajoa to keep it hidden so their son could grow up without carrying the burden of guilt or obligation. The stranger explained that the bracelet and the letter were reminders of that promise. Kofi's mind raced as anger and heartbreak mixed inside him. He struggled to understand why his mother never told him the truth, why she carried the fear alone for so many years. The man then dropped another revelation that shook Kofi even deeper. He said the scratched figure in the photograph was someone who had once demanded the agreement be fulfilled. Years ago, that person had disappeared after threatening to return when Kofi became successful. The stranger explained he had been trying to warn the family that the past was beginning to resurface. Kofi realized that his mother's fear was never about shame, but about protecting him from a pressure that could control his future. Overwhelmed, Kofi rushed back home, his thoughts spinning wildly. When he arrived, he found Mama Ajoa sitting quietly outside the house with her small bag beside her, exactly as she had been the night he forced her out. Seeing her sitting there broke something inside him. He walked toward her slowly, his eyes filled with regret. Before he could speak, Mama Ajoa stood up, tears already streaming down her face. She admitted she had planned to leave on her own because she believed her past would destroy the peaceful life Kofi had built. Kofi fell to his knees in front of her, holding the bracelet tightly. He told her he finally understood why she had kept silent and why she tried to stop him from chasing the truth. He apologized for pushing her away and admitted that fear and confusion had made him blind to her sacrifices. Mama Ajoa held his face gently, reminding him that a mother's love does not disappear because of mistakes. They embraced, both crying under the quiet afternoon sky, finally releasing years of hidden pain. But as they stood there trying to rebuild what had almost been lost, Kofi noticed something that made his heart skip. Across the street, parked beneath a large tree, sat a dark vehicle he had never seen before. The window rolled down slowly and inside he caught a brief glimpse of someone watching them. On the person's wrist was a bracelet identical to the one Kofi held in his hand, suggesting that the promise tied to his family might not be over after all. Kofi's body stiffened as he noticed the dark vehicle across the street. The figure inside remained still for a few seconds before the window slowly rolled back up. The engine started quietly, and the car drove away without rushing, disappearing down the road as if it had only come to confirm something. Kofi felt a wave of fear rising again, but this time he tightened his grip around his mother's hand instead of letting panic take control. Mama Ajoa followed his gaze and immediately understood what he had seen. Her face showed worry, but she gently squeezed his hand, reminding him without words that they were no longer facing the past alone. They walked back into the house together, both carrying the heavy emotions of everything that had been revealed. The house, which once felt cold and divided, slowly began to feel warm again. Kofi placed the bracelet and the old letter carefully on the table. He asked his mother to sit with him, telling her he wanted to hear everything, not as a son demanding answers, but as someone ready to understand her pain. Mama Ajoa took a deep breath and finally shared the full story she had hidden for years. She explained how desperation had forced her to accept help during her husband's illness and how that decision had haunted her long after Kofi's father passed away. She told him that the person behind the agreement had eventually disappeared, and she believed the chapter of her life had ended. The stranger who met Kofi earlier had only been someone who helped keep the secret safe out of respect for Kofi's father. Mama Ajoa admitted she had lived in constant fear that one day someone would return to claim the promise in a way that could trap Kofi in obligations he never chose. She said every success Kofi achieved brought her pride, but also fear that the past might come looking for him. Kofi listened quietly, his heart softening with every word. He realized his mother had carried years of anxiety while still giving him love, support, and encouragement. He reached for her hands and assured her that whatever the past tried to bring, they would face it together with honesty and courage. For the first time in many years, Mama Ajoa allowed herself to believe she was no longer alone in protecting their family's peace. Over the next few days, Kofi contacted the elderly man from a Boso village and thanked him for trying to warn him. The old man shared wise words, reminding Kofi that families are not defined by secrets or mistakes but by how they choose to heal and move forward. Kofi also spoke with his cousin Amma, clearing the rumors that had begun to spread among relatives. Slowly, the tension that had surrounded their family began to settle, replaced by understanding and renewed trust. Although the mysterious vehicle and the matching bracelet remained an unanswered question, Kofi made a decision not to live in fear of shadows. Instead, he focused on strengthening his bond with his mother and honoring the sacrifices that shaped his journey from the village to success. Mama Ajoa returned to her favorite evening routine, sitting outside the house, watching the sunset while offering quiet prayers of gratitude rather than fear. In time, the story of the night Kofi pushed his mother out of his home became a lesson shared quietly among those who knew them. It reminded people that African family stories often carry hidden struggles, deep sacrifices, and powerful love that survives even painful misunderstandings. Kofi learned that success means little if it is built without compassion, and Mama Ajoa found peace knowing her son had grown not only in wealth but in heart. As the sun set one evening, Kofi joined his mother outside, both watching the golden sky fade into night. Neither spoke about the dark vehicle again, but both understood that some mysteries do not need to control the future. What mattered most was that they had found their way back to each other, proving that forgiveness, truth, and family love can heal even the deepest wounds.